Well, hello and welcome back to Read Becca. We're here once again for my weekly chatty catch-up on everything I've read, everything I'm currently reading, and everything I'm looking forward to reading, as well as some general lifey chat and catch-up. So the first week of 2026. Exciting, a new year, and yet we're closing off a lot of things from the end of last year here. So I have an unusually large amount of stuff to wrap up today, and I'm kind of going to rapid fire this a little bit, or try to. I never live up to it when I say that. So I'm going to try to kind of rapid fire because most of it I don't have a ton to say about. And the one thing I kind of do have a lot to say about, I probably don't really need to because it's so well known. So very, very quickly, the first things I read in the new year were children's graphic novels, and I read volume 1 and volume 2 of the Detective Beans comics by Li Chen. And I heard about these from my friend over at Penny, the Paperback Cat. These are so cute, and they're available on Hoopla if you have Hoopla through your library. So I really enjoyed them, but they're just kind of fluffy children's comics following a young cat called Detective Beans, or Beans, who is playing at being a detective. The first is the case of the missing hat, and that is exactly what it sounds like. Beans loses their hat, and it goes from one place to the next, and is always one step ahead of Beans as they're going around town looking for this hat. And that's what it is. It's all about going through the community. The second is more like a collection of individual comics that are only 2 or 3 pages long. And so there isn't a theme running through, but it is, again, Beans solving little, short, very, very mundane cases. Often that the people that Beans is solving them for don't even know that it's actually a mystery that Beans is working on. So it just really charmed me, and the artwork is beautiful and really colorful. I had a great time with it, so I'm glad to have heard about it, and I kind of specifically knew this was out there and saved it for something quick and light and charming for my first read of the year. So moving backward, let's go to some sequels that I read. The first, we'll talk about a new one that I read, The Mouthful of Dust by Nghi. This is a brand new release in the Singing Hills cycle. We are in this series following a monk, Chi, who is a cleric from this specific, the Singing Hills Monastery that collects history. And so they travel around all over the place. And she also has a talking sentient kind of bird. It's a sort of spirit that also can retain memory. So this one is especially short. This is barely a novella. It's under 100 pages. And I really enjoyed this. The previous entry before this, I was not so on board with. I didn't love it, but this was a return to form for me. It's very dark though, and this one is probably the most grounded in reality. The title very obviously refers to famine, and that is the topic here. And so Chi is traveling into this place that had been through in the past a period of famine. And we do have a paranormal element there in this area having been beset by a famine demon, something that's all-consuming and ever hungry and never sated. But that's really, really minor to this. This is much more, they're in a place where they've been through famine, they've had to do horrible things to survive, and they really mistrust the clerics from Singing Hills there because of the fact that they don't really want to dig into that history. They know that they're retaining that history, and they know how deep and dark that history can be. So there is very early on, some cannibalism in their history. So that's really hard to read about. Children and elderly people dying rapidly in that situation because they're the most vulnerable to those conditions. It's just really bleak and hard, and yet the writing is so gorgeous, and that's really consistent of Nghi's work. So all of the things that didn't work for me in the previous entry, where it was very dreamlike and fabulous almost, this one is super grounded and very realist, and it's really about this hardship and the difficult times and things that the people had to do to survive, with a little bit of speculative element to it. And so I really, really enjoyed this, and it was, like I said, a return to form for me in this series. So I think Nghi should just continue writing these forever, pretty much. And that kind of goes for the next book, which is What Stalks the Deep by Kingfisher, the third in the Sworn Soldier novella series. And this is also the latest of those released. I think it was earlier this year maybe, but Kingfisher puts out so much stuff that I'm not even sure when it was released. So this one I actually read in mid-November, and I was looking through things at the end of the year and realized I had tracked it in some places and not in others. And then I could not find that I had talked about it on video, though I remember talking about it. So I may have talked about it to an individual and not here. So I'm coming back. We're looping back. So I may just be repeating stuff that I already have, but I couldn't find it. So anyway, this is a historical fantasy horror series that follows kind of a monster of the week format. So each novella has been in a different location with a different type of monster that they're confronting. In this series, we're following Alex, and in this particular book, Alex is in a totally new location, being in the US, having been called over by a friend to investigate a haunted mine, more or less, a haunted cave. And I think it was somewhere in Appalachia, but it's far enough past that it's not like common day Appalachia, certainly. And this one was really, really different for me because it almost felt like a cozy mystery rather than a paranormal horror. There is a paranormal element there, but the horror wasn't very horrifying. It was much more atmosphere, being really ominous and the spooky mine. And I really, really liked the monster of the week that this features, but it also wasn't very horrifying to me at all. So while this was less like the rest of the series, I liked it a lot more than book 2. Book 2 I thought was fine. This one I really enjoyed, but it felt very, very different. It felt like a big departure. The character, though, Alex, still felt the same, and I really liked a lot of the same aspects about Alex as a character, but it felt like a kind of different book. I'm not mad at it, though. So I would say very cozy, calming vibes here, not a lot of horror. So that's Sworn Soldier, book 3. And then, complete detour to nonfiction. I listened to the audio of We Are Experiencing a Slight Delay by Gary Janetti. I really didn't know anything about this. I knew that it was a travel memoir type of book, and it was going to be very humorous. And the author, I had no clue about, but is a sort of a humor writer for TV and lots of different types of projects, and has worked on Family Guy, so it's that kind of sense of humor that's very confronting and in your face. He's also very, very like a catty gay, I would say. His voice also on audio kind of reminds me of Billy Eichner, Billy on the Street, if you know who that is. So a very Marmite flavor, I would say, to the humor and the voice as well. So I enjoyed it. It didn't really stand out to me. And I think what I enjoyed so much about this is it is a travel memoir. It's about all these really crazy experiences that he's been through. And I loved the way it opened. It started with stories about him and his partner going to Italy in August, which I've been to Italy in August, and that's this very specific experience. But they're not going for the traditional Italian experience. They're going to sort of an extreme wellness retreat, and he has done nothing to prepare. And it weirdly lined up with a movie that I watched this week as well, which I guess I'll talk about a little later, but Happiness for Beginners, where someone goes off on this hike on the Appalachian Trail and is not really prepared for it. And that this involves a lot of hiking and not really feeling prepared for it. So I really enjoyed that, the way that kind of aligned, interestingly. And I loved his stories, though I think, again, it will be a very specific flavor for people who don't get along with this. He's kind of negative about a lot of things and rants about things, like having a meal at Noma, which is a very famous restaurant, and just sort of bashing it and talking about all of the things that you wouldn't think of as negatives to eating a 20-course tasting menu, you know? And that's something I will never experience, I'm sure. And so it is very funny, though he's kind of not taking advantage of or not appreciating his advantages and privileges in being able to access that thing. But he also tells like all of these great stories about family and the places he's been that for me felt so much more connected to the joy of people and experiences, but he always kind of tells it in a really biting way. And that's just his sense of humor. So I got along with that. I don't think it will be for everyone. And it was, I needed something light to listen to in the car while I was driving, just in between books, because everything else I had going, I had in print or as hybrid reads. So I just needed something that would pop on in the car. And this was perfect for that. So it worked out exactly as I wanted. And the final thing for my end of the year completions, that was a big success, is Middlemarch. So this I have so much to say about because it is a massive classic and I loved it so much. I have been reading this since March. It was my March of the Mammoth selection and it was my first time reading it. And I pretty much finished it and immediately wanted to turn around and start reading it again because you just want to inhabit Middlemarch, which is the place that this takes place in. And I now understand why so many people talk about having that instinct and the fact that there are people who, as a group, kind of just continually are reading Middlemarch every year, year after year. And it's just so charming. And it's so hard to get across what this is even about because it's not about an individual person. I think if I'm trying to get across to someone who hasn't read it, most what I would liken it to is like Jane Austen, if you sort of reduced the romance. There's romance there, but it's not a prominent central aspect, except in the fact that is a social task of the time. And I think probably Sense and Sensibility is very similar to this, but the scope is so much grander. You're getting families and community across Middlemarch. You're getting these large and small dramas. We do kind of have a central character in Dorothea, who we start with, and then things branch out from her, really. But she's not necessarily a main character, though she is the most main character that we have. Dorothea is such an enigma, and I didn't like her at first. And I think that's a theme over the course of this book. A lot of the characters I didn't like at first, but they won me over. She's very, very pious, and she's really headstrong and has all these ideas, but yet she's so sure that she needs to get married and be subservient to a man so that she can assist them in whatever they're doing and be completely subservient to them. But yet she has all of her own ideas in how that's going to play out and doesn't realize the conflict, the interior conflict of what she's thinking. And so it begins with kind of this marriage prospect and everyone thinking that there's this great prospect for her, but her really wanting to go for someone who is much more like heady and much more scholarly. And she chases after a guy everyone thinks is totally wrong for her because he's an old man who really spends a lot of time with dusty books. And they're like, what are you doing? You're not going to be happy in this marriage. But she's so sure of herself. And then she kind of goes through the process of recognizing the problems of that and that things in life, her as this young 20-year-old, not really knowing that much about the world, comes to realize that, oh yeah, there's a lot going on here that I didn't realize. And I'm not going to get all of the things I want. I'm not going to be totally included in his scholarly pursuits as a woman. And I kind of just have to take the scraps of what he'll allow me to do. So there are those aspects, and the gender dynamics I think are so interesting. Oh my gosh. I'm sure someone has done like dissertations on this probably, but what struck me so much about this book versus other books of the time, that the women characters they are beyond being fully formed women, so much about the men's decisions in their lives. We get to see how much the women have thoughts about those things and also are deeply affected by those things, even when the men haven't considered them or are just literally telling them, you just have to abide by what I tell you. And that happens over and over and over through many couples that we see married, parents and children. It just really gives you a rich sense of the social duties and also something that probably wasn't explored as much. Just the interior life of women isn't depicted on page a whole lot during that time. So these are just such great characters on their own. I think on top of that, by chance, I happened to have recently read A Wind in the Willows related book. And I couldn't help but compare this as I was reading that toward the end of this, compare the two, because the community aspects, this is very like quiet town with occasional dust ups, but it's mostly the happenings of the community. And so the structure of this doesn't really follow a plot. It just moves forward chronologically, not to drive plot forward, but just because time is passing and you're seeing how lives are playing out in this community. And that's really how A Wind in the Willows is structured as well. And there's even a character here called Fred Vincy, who's a young man. He's kind of a troublemaker, but everyone's constantly rallying around him and trying to give him the best and help him be the best version of himself. So people are constantly supporting him, even as he's getting into scrapes with gambling and buying horses. And like he loves this woman who wants him to take responsibility for himself and will not go along with him until he does. And he's gotten an education, but if only he could find something he enjoys rather than the thing that he got his education for, then he would be set. And he couldn't have possibly foreseen that he would really not like the boring thing. And he's such a character. And I really didn't like him at first because of that. And he totally won me over. But he reminds me so much of Toad from Wind in the Willows. Like, he is exactly Toad energy. And so I could ramble on. I could so ramble on about this. I enjoyed this so much. It delighted me so much. And it didn't take me, 8 months to read because I wasn't liking it. It just is very easy to set down and not get back to. And I was specifically hybrid reading this with the audiobook that's narrated by Juliet Stevenson, which is available on Hoopla as well. And I kept losing the audiobook and not wanting to go back to this without the audio because it was such a richer experience because it's a great narration. And so I kept kind of pausing and waiting to get back the audio and running out of borrows on Hoopla and then getting it back and getting a little way longer. And just being in it periodically was so nice. So I was almost wanting to just soak in this rather than speed read through it that caused it to take so long, and that's ultimately completely fine. I just really also did want to finish it and have experienced the book too. And so I had warring motives in both wanting to finish this and not wanting to finish this. But I am glad I have read it once, and I fully expect that I will probably read it again at least once or more than once in my life, because this is definitely a place I want to come back to. And this was also my first George Eliot. So now I know I need to read some more George Eliot. Anyway, so with that, those are the books that I read within the past week since I last checked in. That was a lot. Well, except for What Stalks the Deep, which was from November. So that was a lot. What I have in progress, I'm very, very nearly done with Gideon the Ninth. I've read this before, so I've read all 3 books that are out. I really love this book and I'm loving it even more on the reread. So not a surprise, but that is my book club book. So I have to finish it this weekend because the book club meets this weekend. I am also buddy reading What Doesn't Kill Us Makes Us, Who We Become After Tragedy and Trauma by Mike Mariani. So this is going to be a longer buddy read, so I probably will not hold it up every week. And then other than Middlemarch, I've had another long ongoing since October, House of Leaves. And I made some actual good progress on this since I finished Middlemarch. So this one may be finished shortly as well. Or it may not. Who knows? It's not a huge priority if I don't. So those are all the books. Onward to what I watched. I watched a couple of random things, and mainly because of New Year's Eve. So I tried to watch some movies while doing other stuff on New Year's Eve. And I ended up slacking off on the doing other stuff a little bit and just watching because my brain was not with me on that night. For whatever reason, just real bad brain fog. But I watched Happiness for Beginners, which I mentioned earlier. And that is based on a book. I had gone back and forth on whether I wanted to read it or just watch it. And I think I'm fine with just watching it because it is kind of a fluffy, optimistic, sort of general fiction book, I would say, with a romance undercurrent to it. So maybe it fits in chick lit, I don't know. But it's very hopeful. So this woman's going through a divorce or has been through a divorce and is trying to kind of jumpstart or restart herself. And so she goes on this hiking trip that is supposed to be for beginners, but it's really a very difficult, rugged situation on the Appalachian Trail. And I really enjoyed it. I found it to be heartwarming and sweet without being overly saccharine and trite. And so I had heard about this from my friend Shannon, who told me that I could go ahead and watch it and probably really enjoy it because of that. And I think it was exactly that right tone. So I also watched Wake Up Dead Man, the new Knives Out movie. And I would say I enjoyed it, but with a lot of temperance on that because it's pretty hardcore. In terms of the commentary, it's going really, really strong and really, really heavy-handed about Christian nationalism. Like really, really overt. And so I liked all of the kind of set pieces and the fact that it's taking place in this church where we have a young priest who has been sent to this parish that has an older priest, a monsignor, I think. They keep correcting people who say the wrong thing. But this older monsignor, played by Josh Brolin, who is extremely like fire and brimstone, and he's very much about judgment and perfection. And of course, as you go through, you find out it's very insidious. But he's been driving away people and is creating a radicalized congregation there because of the way that he views the world and the legalism of his church. And so having come from that background a lot, like it was really, really hard watching at moments. But then of course there's a murder mystery, and it seemed a little odd when the detective finally actually shows up. He didn't really fit in anywhere. That was a little strange. But I think overall I did like it, and I really hope to have those movies continue. I don't know, because I feel like what little I have seen in response to this has been very mixed, but I haven't seen a lot of response to this so far since it came out. So I don't know. So those are the movies I watched. And then I also was wanting something light and fluffy and like late night watching type of stuff, because I've been having really bad insomnia. And so I've been watching The Boyfriend, a Japanese reality dating show for gay men. And I just love this show. Like, it's so great. It's very cozy, very calm. They're really slow moving. Like they're there weeks, I think, before anybody even starts pairing up. And they also have to run a coffee truck, which is really interesting. I really like that dynamic, because most often in those types of shows, in like American and British dating shows, people are paired up and immediately like are forced together, and they have nothing else to do. They're just trapped in a house together for the most part. And here, like they are working this coffee truck, and they have these moments while they're at a task that is not them focused on each other. And they are getting some private time in that, because most of the time there's only two of them working the coffee truck at a time. And they do get to have some kind of selection there. But like they have so many just genuine, heartfelt conversations that I really just loved it. And they're just seem like such sweet guys, even when you're like, this guy probably is a total player in real life, but they come across very, very sweet. There's also a group of commentators who are a little over the top. One of them is a drag queen, and they were pretty fun as well and seem like very hopeful and genuine about this group. I do think one of the guys was kind of a problem and was very like volatile about his emotions and just kept shutting down. Like he would literally deal with a situation he didn't want to be in by just sort of laying down and taking a nap and not interacting, even if he's in the middle of the group. It was very strange, and I think he created a lot of problems for the other people. But I think in the end, it was overall a very, very sweet show. And it was like exactly what I was looking for. So that's watching stuff. I think that's it for all my media. As far as life, again, New Year's Eve was good, but I've been having really bad insomnia, so that has been central to my past week. And everyone, it seems, around here, I think it's going around everywhere, but everyone, it seems, has been having the flu around. So I've been taking extra care with anything public and minimizing my interactions with people, because I do not want to get sick. But I don't think my insomnia has been tied to illness at all, though, as I mentioned, I had really, really bad brain fog as well. So I don't know what is going on, but energy levels have been very low. I also had a fun project. I showed off my project for my little dinosaur last week. This week I did a needle felted Highland cow, and it was my very first time attempting needle felting. It did not go great, but it is distinguishable as a cow, I think, and that is about all I hoped for out of this. So I attempted, and I do think it was kind of fun, but I didn't fully understand it. I had a kit that I got to do it, and it's very normal with those kits. They don't explain to you like the exact basics. Like they show you kind of how you're supposed to do things. This was really wild because it's literally just pictures of what you're supposed to do. There were no instructions. And so I didn't know how to needle felt, so I didn't even know what I was supposed to be doing. And needle felting is literally just a barbed needle that you just stab the felt with a lot. And then it sort of adheres together tighter and tighter. So that was interesting and good, because you could do that. Like I did that while I was watching stuff. And you can do that, and there's no counting required. You're literally just stabbing a thing with a needle until it gets into the shape you want. But I don't have the technique skills. So I kind of watched a couple of basic how-to videos on YouTube. That's my kind of go-to for how I figure out how to do things in many aspects of life. But I think I would need to get much better before I felt confident in doing it. And I don't know how much I want to invest in it, but it was kind of fun and it was easy to pick up. It took very, very little effort. And as I said, no counting to keep track of whatsoever. So it's great to have in your hands to do, but I don't feel like I can make anything that's actually useful. So again, what am I doing it for is kind of a question. If I'm just doing it for fun, do I want to invest in that or not? I don't know. I'm still up in the air, but it was kind of enjoyable and fun to try the little kit that I got. So I think other than that's about it. I've been on the go a little bit this week, but not too much. And trying to get my equilibrium back from the insomnia is mainly what I'm doing. So as we look forward into the new year, I think this week I will have my TBR out. I'm trying to keep it very light and under control for this first month of the year and not go too crazy, because right now I am feeling a lot of the excitement of the new year. So I think with that, this has been too long as usual, but I'm going to wrap it up there and hope that you have a wonderful week in reading and in life. And thank you so very much for watching.